Well, thank you, Sarah, and welcome to you all to our session. We will be sharing with you the ArcGIS platform capabilities, some innovative analytics and app configurations that we used for the protecting patient access to community pharmacy services. We undertook this work for the Department of Health and Social Care, NHS England and NHS Improvement, as well as the England's community pharmacies. FAS, or the Pharmacy Access Scheme, as we know it, is a means-tested support scheme in which, through a mix of variables or criteria that involve proximity of pharmacies to each other, prescribing volumes, as well as location in deprived areas, the Department of Health and Social Care is able to work out a policy by which they provide support funding to the most vulnerable pharmacies in terms of viability, all in the aim of trying to ensure that the hardest to reach areas do have access to a pharmacy. Now, with me today are my colleagues and co-presenters. I've got James Simpson, who will provide an overview of the data prep, modeling, and analytics we undertook, highlighting some of the key solutions and customer apps and configurations that were deployed. Claire Scarborough, who will illustrate to us how our refined requirements gathering and process mapping informed us and directed us towards the blend of Esri technologies and apps that we used to come up with the end-to-end solution. And I am Cliff Mwando. Now, imagine this. You wake up one morning, you're feeling a little bit under the weather, or perhaps you've been to your GP and your GP prescribes some prescription, one-off, or maybe it's a repeat. It is a short hop for you to a local pharmacy who will dispense your prescription, offer you health advice, and you are back on your feet again. That is a very common occurrence. And that is enabled by the high level of assured access to pharmacies that we enjoy in England. As it were, 1.6 million people make a visit to the pharmacy in England every day. Such visits are made possible by an extensive network of community pharmacies, of which we've got over 11,600 nationwide, located close to where we live, where we work, or where we shop. Such coverage plays a very crucial role in reducing health inequalities, with upward of 99% of the population in the most deprived areas having access to a community pharmacy within a 20-minute walking distance. In terms of our analytical work in FAS, it established and quantified that accessibility, underpinned by the proximity of pharmacies to each other, with those that were over 1 mile, or those that were over 0.8 miles if located in a deprived area, being candidates for these support payments. But that's also being controlled by their prescribing volumes, in other words, the level of business they do. The result of our work actually underpinned how and to whom the national FAS budget of 20 million is disbursed by the Department of Health and Social Care through the NHS services. The other key component for our work was it enabled transparency in the whole process, with evidence gathering and sharing between the various stakeholders that were involved in this particular project. Now, in terms of the stakeholders in the project, very quickly, we had the Department of Health and Social Care being the policy custodian and the project initiator and sponsor. They commissioned the work and our services. The community pharmacies themselves, or what we call community pharmacy contractors, who are the direct beneficiaries of these funding payments. And then we also have the Pharmaceutical Services Negotiating Committee, who were they are actually the contractual negotiators for and on behalf of the pharmacies. So we engaged with these ones from the point of methodology, and they signed it off as the best they had seen so far in terms of FAR's work. And then we also had NHS England and NHS Improvement, who through 13 regional teams managed the contractual delivery of this project and were actually responsible behind the review process and ensuring that the determinations are communicated. Finally, obviously, there were ourselves who were the judge, the jury, and the executioners, because we designed the solution, we built the app, and we managed the project. I'll hand you over now to my colleague, James, to take it away from here. James.
Thank you, Cliff. Right, once all the cats were herded for all the different groups and we got an agreed method, we actually had to go about building the product. So I'll be walking you through that. Firstly, we had to identify the tools and outputs needed for the job. These were the desktop ArcGIS Pro to create the pharmacy datasets and the actual routing themselves, an ArcGIS online web application to present the analysis to the customer, and a hub, which we use as a gateway to our tools, but also back to, as we've seen many different partners on this, so back to the NHS England pages, back to the Department of Health and Social Care pages, and so on and so forth. Right, so once we identified the tools and outputs, we actually go about creating the, sorry, ignore me, I'm repeating myself. Okay, yeah, so we used ArcGIS Pro and FME to geocode all the pharmacies in England to their precise sites. So that was the first thing we needed to do. First, we had to match the pharmacies to the geolocations we had already. So we had locations in the southeast and the southwest, because that's where we primarily operate as NHS South, Central and West. The Department of Health and Social Care also provided us a list of pharmacies, which we then geocoded to OS address base. And lastly, because there's always a few stragglers, we had to geocode manually a few remaining pharmacies to their accurate location. The next step was to do the routing to the 5 nearest pharmacies based on walking distance. We used a custom-built OS Highways network dataset to do this. And we also used the network analysis functionality of ArcGIS Pro. For the facilities and indices, the origin and destinations, we used the pharmacy dataset in both instances. So we're doing basically the pharmacy datasets back to itself. We created routes to the 5 nearest pharmacies, or to the 6 nearest pharmacies even, because by duplicating the indices and the origins and the destination points, every pharmacy would go to itself. And we based this on walking, so walking distance, so a car was not taken into account for this. And this provided us with a distance variable we needed to calculate if the pharmacy was eligible for the scheme. Finally, we formatted the outputs. We stripped away all the unnecessary information that would not be relevant to the contractors or the Department of Health and Social Care. And this is what we had, the pharmacy locations, the 5 nearest pharmacies, and routing between those two previous things there. Right, once all the outputs were complete, we needed to communicate the results to the clients, the pharmacy contractors, who basically are the pharmacy managers. So the results were presented using a web application embedded in a hub page. We duplicated the Department of Health and Social Care with their permission, obviously, in a hub page there, so it looked all official. But it's also, as I said before, contained information on what FAS is, links to relevant pages, and also links to how to appeal. So this is the actual tool itself. So these would be presented with just a filter box, and they'd enter in an access code that would be given to them by the Department of Health and Social Care. Let me see me typing in the code. That's very interesting. The app then zooms to the relevant geography. So it shows them their pharmacy and also the 2 nearest pharmacies. We had for 5, but we showed 2 because to not present too much noise to the customer. And as you can see, the benefit of using web application rather than an image, which was done previously, was it allowed the user to zoom in, interrogate what was going on, also see directly the route that was taken. If there's a weird side path taken, they could see that, which they didn't want to be if it's a full extent static map. So once we completed the initial work, NHS England came back to us with the next step, which was to basically collect the reviews for the project. So if we messed up, or if the pharmacies believed we messed up with our analysis, they could review the decision if they thought they were eligible for VAS. And to do this, we used Survey 123 to complete this task. So we used Survey 123 due to the customizations it allows beyond Connect, because it allows more customization than the web version. And this is what it looked like there. So we used quite a lot of functions within the XLS form. So we used the select to present a drop-down of options to the user. We used groups. Different groups appeared depending on different options appeared depending on what they'd chosen from the select feature. The ability to use a geopoint. So if we put the pharmacy in the wrong location, they could pinpoint exactly where they thought the location was. And also constraints were heavily used throughout. So the survey was linked to a CSV, which contained an access code and some information about the pharmacy. So when the pharmacists came in, they typed in their code, and their information about their pharmacy was presented back to them. As you can see, the information is presented back to them there. Let's go back, sorry. Once they've entered the right thing, they can choose the reason for review. So in actually the pharmacy premises here, they could upload an image to accompany their claim. They could also put in a geopoint there. And also there's some information down the bottom for them to write some more open-ended commentary to their claim as well. And at the very end, there was a page for them to upload some documents to accompany it as well. Right, I'm now going to hand over to Claire, who will take you through the evolving process.
Thanks very much, James, for talking through how we did the pharmacy routing. I'm now going to explore how we displayed the outputs of this analysis for our customers. So, at the beginning of this project, we knew we would be undertaking routing analysis. In the past, this may have taken the form of PDF maps, Excel, document summaries. There might be requirement for a review, whereby things we could not anticipate in the real world would mean this analysis would not be fair in some cases. For example, impassable steps, or unsafe or unlit pathways, variables that aren't present in the network dataset. We're talking about real people here and access to essential community pharmacy services, so it's important to take these real-world factors into account. We would rerun the routing with points and barriers to accommodate this. What Esri enabled us to do is to bring together a huge range of technical solutions in one easy-to-use final product for the reviewers of these cases. The first section, covered by James, was the hub to display the information back to the pharmacist for review, including web apps, maps, the hub, and a Survey 123 form to actually submit their application. In order to facilitate the review process, what I will be focusing on showing was creating an online dashboard for NHS England and Improvement, regional teams to use to see the information about each case and progress the decisions towards the committee boards. I'll now talk through how we configured that dashboard. So we created an app that took elements from what was collected in the Survey 123 in the form of a feature service and brought it together with the functionality of other apps. So the final app, although a dashboard, embedded the capabilities of other apps. The key here in exploring the best outcome was to be driven by the customer requirements, refine their needs, and then linking this to the capability of each application. A dashboard may be what they need, it may be what they asked for, but the functionality of a web app or the ease of a survey structuring their responses was essential. So if I look through each element of what you can see on the screen and kind of why we chose it and the benefits of each. The hub, it was easy to use, it's seamless, it's like a website, and it's familiar. It's a great place to host it. The routing in ArcPro, as described by James, was objective. It's evidence-based decision-making, and you've got an accurate record of what was done and why. Web apps, as we know, they're highly configurable. The filter functionality was perfect here, and the visualization of routes was essential to knowing why the decision was made as it was. Survey 123, structuring their answers with predefined options where appropriate and validating those answers so that the feature service was usable in the dashboard later. So obviously we gave free text boxes, but yeah, we needed kind of predefined things for our next outputs. And surveys are easy for those to use who are not familiar with GIS. We could capture data, upload images, and more. So we chose each element, as I mentioned, based on its capability. We worried about blending the solution together at the end, once we knew the customer requirements and the applications that we needed to support it. We did not limit ourselves or direct for one style of app from the beginning. Now, on the next screen, I'm going to show you how that looks in practice. So there's a few different things all embedded within one. So you've got in the center of the screen on the dashboard the map. This is actually the pin that was dropped in the online form if the actual pharmacy itself was identified to be in the incorrect location. Along the top, you've got filters for the NHS England regions, the access code, and the progress of the case. So whether it's been approved, rejected, in progress, to kind of filter, because there was loads of cases. And the left and right-hand side is driven by the feature service itself, so specific to the access code that you're looking at. On the right, bottom right, you've also got external links to extra documents that are uploaded. And in the middle, you've got the tabbed approach, so you can see this is an example of an image that a contractor has uploaded to evidence their case. And here is another survey form embedded actually within the dashboard itself. It's got options to say, is the case in progress, approved, rejected, and the contractor can, the NHS England reviewer can add comments to say how it's progressing, what information they need from who, and we can also add comments. So, for example, we did remapping, and we added why. So that was how the solution looked in the end, and I'll now pass you back to Cliff, who can tell you about what we learned on the way.
Thank you very much, Claire. So we had it, how a simple ask of, is it possible we can get a big spreadsheet lookup of all the pharmacies in England and the distance to each other? Okay, it's possible, but why? Oh no, we want to decide if this one can be funded. Oh, okay. Have you ever considered it in a different way? What we see here is a process in which, for us, there were three key things we learned and we sort of embraced. Stakeholder management, the data modeling, coding, routing, as well as the preconception of, I am going to work for an end-to-end solution. It's not about a web app, it's not about ArcGIS Pro. I'm looking at something that addresses this requirement. Moving very quickly back to the stakeholder. As you saw earlier, there were multiple stakeholders in here, each one coming into this particular project with a specific mandate. And the stakeholder engagement there was key for us to actually unlock and get us where we are. And we realized that when our customers come to us, often they know what they want, but usually this is masked by overstating it in product terms. So this iterative engagement, refining the requirements, proved key for us to actually to be able to put this thing together. The other thing we took away, this was a very contentious project. Transparency turned out to be very key. PSNC was there to actually look at the interest of the pharmacists, to see and ensure that the method of analytics we were deploying met with rigor. And we were quite transparent with the challenges we came across, what we realized as the blockers. Some of these actually we mitigated. We were able to find ways of using test areas and preempt on certain things. Others we had to acknowledge there is a margin of error, and they became the fundamental grounds around which pharmacists could ask for a review, which we then saw embedded in those forms. Data modeling, geocoding, and routing. Our advice is you need to invest a lot of time in that. That was the blood, sweat, and tears for us. There were lots of things that we had to unpack. From working with 11,000 pharmacies from a spreadsheet, geocoding those, we learned we needed to use multiple sources to validate those results. Even when we analyzed doing the routing, we had to take several test areas and sign that past our stakeholders. And finally, in the end-to-end solution design, I think what we realized was it is key, as Claire mentioned, to be driven by the requirement that has been put forward for us. We restate that requirement, we go back, we interpret, we identify gaps in what they perceive as the solution. But after that, we identify what capabilities can we have, and then subsequently we focus on the usability of the application to the end user. So in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We are SCW Geospatial Service. Our details are on there. If you want to ask any questions, we are here. I hand you back now to Sarah. Thank you.